President College. That's why I had to update. But no, I don't. I think yours is flat out.
Last Saturday. You gotta put up 10%, so it's really 25%.
Well. Let me hear that.
The 27th.
Ready for you?
I'll have to check and see if I can get that.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here. Happy August. Can't believe it's almost finished with August already. Good to see everybody. We do have a quorum, so I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. And before we, on the adoption of the agenda, if we could, we're going to make a change to the agenda. We're going to move item number 10, which is our NC Board of Transportation update by Tony Lathrop. Move that to agenda item number 6, and then everything will just cascade down from there. That makes sense. So we're going to go from the consent agenda down to insert item number 10, and then move forward with that. So if I could get a motion to approve that agenda.
I'll move.
Got a first and a second. All those in favor say aye. Anybody opposed? Motion carries. Right, we'll move on to our public comment period, and we have one person signed up to speak, Mr. Carson Cone. See, there he is. Mr. Cone, good to see you again. Good evening. Good. Have 3 minutes.
I feel disappointed that no one's spoken up other than Lee Altman, Commissioner Altman, regarding the required voucher for the toll roads for the express lanes that are proposed for expansion. Some of you have told me after meetings, outside of meetings, that you agree with me that there should be a voucher. And I'm asking that you please bring that up for discussion. I'll leave it at that for the toll lane vouchers. I think I've said what I've had to say. Mr. Driggs, this also applies to the city of Charlotte, what I'm about to say next. So I wanted to talk about the bus stops. If you go down Graham Street, and I've seen other places, I think, but I know Graham Street has a lot of bus stops without shelters. And I feel that we have a lot of blue collar workers going down Graham Street. You can drive down there and see them sitting on the sidewalk in the heat, in the conditions. And I feel that if we had shelters at the bus stops, that it would be very beneficial for those citizens of our community. Also, regarding the bus stops, there's an old saying that says, an idle mind is the devil's playground. So if you're sitting at a bus stop and you can't afford a car, that's why you're at the bus stop. You can't afford a cell phone, possibly. You're just going to be sitting there. So what I propose is little free libraries at the bus stops. I feel this would be beneficial. There could be books for adults and children, and it would give people at bus stops a way of occupying their mind. If you ever see somebody and it seems like they're strung out, they're begging for money, and they seem to be acting erratic, it might be, I think, because their mind has not been occupied enough. I'll leave it at that. I would love some feedback, but I've kind of come to expect not to get that during the meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cone. Sure.
Sir, I just want to note the mobility plan that we're working on now, leading up to a referendum in November for a 1-cent sales tax. One of the top priorities for the bus allocation there is shelters and better bus routes, improved bus service. So that's clearly a priority, and I think that will get attention. We're hoping we can get the referendum passed. On the vouchers, I think that is still an active topic, and I believe it's our goal. I'm not sure what your proposal is, but it is our goal to have provision, and we made it clear for people to get assistance. and be able to use those lanes. So I heard what you said. I just want to say I don't think actually that the various people working on these things are that far out of step with what you're talking about. Thank you. I'm sorry, but.
Yeah, if maybe you can stick around, and then we've also got your email address that I will share that with Councilmember Driggs and let y'all take that offline. Great comment. So thank you, Mr. Cohn. Item number 4, ethics awareness and conflict of interest reminder. Neil, will you help us with that?
In accordance with the State Government Ethics Act, it is the duty of every board member to avoid conflicts of interest. Does any board member have any known conflict of interest with respect to any of the matters coming before the board today? If so, please identify the conflict and refrain from any participation in a particular matter involved.
Hearing none, we'll move on. Thanks, Neil. Mr. Lather,
All right.
hear from our North Carolina Board of Transportation Chair. And we're so fortunate to have you as part of our board here. And look forward to what you have to share. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. I just, I say a little something at all the meetings, but just, wanted to give you all just a bit more of a download, since I'm in this role now and I'm here, I just thought it would be good to do. So y'all tee it up for me.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Where do I hit it? Okay.
Yep.
So I've just become chair. I've been on the board. A lot of you all are newer here. I've been on the board for 8.5 years. And for all that time, I chaired the finance committee, which has been good preparation for all that we have to talk about. And as part of that was on what's called the NC First Task Force, which Jim Trogdon, who was the secretary at the beginning of my time, set up to talk about our revenue model, where all the money comes from for state roads and bridges and gas tax, DMV, and all that. So I've been neck deep in the finance. Let's see, I pointed at something.
No.
Oh, no, went too far. So I'm just going to give you a quick hurricane update and talk about some mainly financial stuff. And it will be quick, but food for thought. And then I'm also glad to talk with any of y'all about it offline as well. As an overview, though, I will say I spend a lot of time here on the ground helping with projects and problems and issues, as Felix will tell you, and sometimes Mark Stafford too in Division 12. So I'm quite engaged here, but really a lot of this is an overlay on that because as board chair, I'm embedded in helping to run the department, and it has 9,000 employees roughly across the state, and now about a $9 billion top line. In any given year, about 8 of it goes to different kinds of work that NCDOT does and puts on the street. A huge chunk of that 8 is new and expanded capital projects. Another giant chunk is maintenance and taking care of what we got. And there's never enough, as we know, but we do the best we can. So quick Hurricane Helene update. Actually, I wonder if I skipped Helene. I guess I'll just tell about it. It's not in here. But I can tell you off the top of my head that Hurricane Helene is a $6 billion issue, $5 billion issue, excuse me. Didn't mean to add another billion there for NCDOT spread out over several years. There's 8 big projects up there that will take up probably almost 4 billion of that. And then hundreds of small projects that are, at various sizes, some, $100,000 projects, some 500,000, some a million, but lots, I mean, like hundreds and hundreds of small bridges and roads. And I've got some numbers here. We've got, so far, basically, we're almost at the year anniversary, and we've spent about 20% of that projected money, just under $1 billion. Right now, we've been reimbursed about 18% of that from the feds, about $180 million. So that we're expecting to get back around 80%, knock on wood, for the 5 billion. And yeah, the total number of projects, rebuild projects, is 6,965 projects coming out of Helene. And about 2,600 of them are 90% done. About 45% are contracted out. 40% we did basically by ourselves, upfront, fast, emergency work. Sites, damaged sites, there's just over 9,000 damaged sites in the mountains. So there's just a lot. What we're hoping, and if we're going to get 4 billion of the 5 billion back, is that somewhere some money will come to help us fill that $1 billion gap. If it's not, then it'll just be spread out over, I don't know, 3 to 5 years and come out of maintenance or other things, hopefully not out of capital projects. And we'll just absorb that. I've got a lot of other numbers about the hurricane, but in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into those, but would be glad to talk with you about it. We've got the 1-year anniversary of it coming up, and I'll be up in the mountains in a couple weeks talking about funding and looking at projects. So I'd be glad to talk with you all offline, but I'm not going to do any more hurricane now. Just overall finances. We show this at our board meetings. This is our sort of a snapshot of what we have. It's as of last month. The top left says cash balance is 2.4. That varies all the time. And I've got a dashboard. I checked this morning. It was about 2.1. And the most logical thing to think of is, holy cow, you've got $2 billion in the bank. Why do you need more money? Why is there not enough money to go around? Well, that money is committed. We have commitments for projects between $9 and $10 billion. So that money's spoken for almost 4 times. So it's a constant cash flow deal for us. So we spend, as you see, just under 700 million a month. And so it's going out pretty quickly. And we track it as days of cash on hand. And generally, anything over 110, we're over a little north of 120, I think, is good. And as a percentage of open commitments, as you can see, it's kind of hard for me to point to it, but it's the bar graphs that are sticking up. In 2025, it's about 25%, which I just said. So, and that's been my life for the last 8 years. Here comes Helene. Well, it was out of order. So I just told you all this. About $1 billion spent, about 20% we've gotten back. Most of it in Division 13 and Division 14 in the mountains. Probably 20% of it in 11, which is the high country, up Blowing Rock, northern mountains. This is just a graph that shows visually what our spend is projected to be. And that kind of light tan gap there is the cash float. And then when you get down to the end, you can sort of see the difference in what we spend and, what's paid back. So that's, we try to keep that model current. So this is just more of what I already talked about. A lot of the The bridges have been fixed. Roads fully reopened is almost all of them, 1428, partly is 41 and I think is a very small number, maybe 30 something that are not open yet. Yep, there we go. So that's some road numbers. This is I-40. That's the biggest of all the projects. Funny because I didn't get hurt, but I almost got bit by a rattlesnake up there. It was something else. It's hard to see here, but between the traffic and the cliff, there's a small construction lane. And then there's movable concrete barriers that are on the side of that. And I had hopped over the barrier at a place where you could walk out a little bit and look. And I was looking down into the river gorge and taking a video. When all of a sudden, we hear this big rattlesnake. And I did a very fast angle back, hop over the barrier about 8 feet away from that snake because he was basically directly behind me. And he gets bigger and bigger every time I tell about it. I swear he was like 8 feet long, the size of a python. And Brian Birch had to jump on the ground and wrestle him. But thankfully I didn't get bit. So public-private partnerships increased to 6 on a statewide basis. And we only do those, as you all well know, without a very thorough determination that there's public support and involvement and buy-in for those. So there's others that are going to be on the table. Time will tell about whether they come to fruition in other parts of the state. It's just another tool we have to pay for things now that might otherwise take 10 plus years to get done in the ordinary course. So, where support is properly there, it's worth a hard look at those. Creative financing. So we've got more roads, state maintained roads than any state in the country except Texas. More than California, more than New York, more than Florida, all the others. And so we're constantly trying to deal with the overall need for more revenue, which is why Jim Trogdon set up the NC First task force that I talked about a few minutes ago. So we have inflation, and in our STIP, the capital program, we built in now 5% per year inflation for the first 5 years, compounded because costs are going up so fast. And it used to be, it was negligible inflation. And then we would have to come back, as a lot of you all know, and then push projects, delay projects because of cost escalations. So we're constantly dealing with that. So, we're having to divert more money for disasters. We've got to maintain the roads, and keep them. We'd like to keep them above a C. And different people will say different things about what the condition of the roads are, but I'll go to the mat saying our roads are better than other places that are near to us. And, and we're proud of that. They can always be better, but they'll probably never be A. B would be nice. They're rated by these national engineering groups that come in and try to do all these report cards. So I mentioned the NC First Commission. That's still up on the department's website with recommendations about how to alter the revenue model. NC Go is an organization that's and it's a consortium of industry partners that contribute to this to basically keep the conversation going about how we're going to pay for all the infrastructure we need, because we're a victim of our own success. And for goodness sake, we see it here, with hundreds of people coming here. I don't remember the exact number, I won't put anybody, I'll put you on the spot, Neil. Do you remember how many people come here every day?
110.
157.
157. There you go.
About 20 something from the last time.
Every day. Every day. That's net.
I think that's Charlotte.
Yeah. So, a lot of states would like to have that growth, but it brings funding problems like this with it. NC Go is one of the lead sponsors of the Transportation Summit in a couple weeks on September 3rd and 4th that we have every year. And there's going to be at least 1,000 partners, stakeholders, industry people, folks like you, elected officials, staff people, engineering firms, construction firms, financing firms. There'll be a lot of people at that where we'll talk about a lot of the biggest issues and latest developments. It's a good use of your time to come for at least part of it. I would encourage you all to do that and good networking in this business, in this industry. And I would encourage you to support NC Go. I help them. I go around the state. They partner with chambers of commerce all over the state to have conversations like this about revenue. There's a few states that have started experimenting with mileage-based user fees. Because the gas tax is a user fee, essentially. The more you use the road, the more gas you buy, and that revenue flows back into DOT for both capital and maintenance. And so as vehicles get more and more fuel efficient or electric vehicles become more prevalent, there gets to be more pressure on that revenue stream. So there's a conversation about eventually what that's going to lead to, and how to have a user fee that works to keep our roads, not just keep them up, but to be able to continue to handle the growth that we have. And Stephen knows all about it. We talk about it all the time, and he's in the thick of it and doing the Lord's work on the Board of Transportation. Thank you. The STIP, we talk about that a lot here. We just adopted the 26 through 35 10-year STIP within the last couple months. And so that will be finally approved by the federal government this fall. And we're already starting the cycle for the next one, even though it will ultimately be approved by our board in the summer of 27. But that's cranking up now. And I know Neil and Bob and the team here is already involved with that. And Neil, you've been on the working group before that sets the methodology and the points for that as well. So there's a lot of knowledge in this room about it with our staff, which is a good thing. So yeah, this is the new one. It's a rough schedule. So the submittal window is started, and you can see through their public comment, scoring, more comment, draft coming out in early 27, and then approval in the summer of 27. So there's public comment now. This is just all the different kinds of projects that could be or are in that plan. So there's a public comment period open. For the board, I'll back up. We've got a lot of talented people on the board, and so we are focusing our energy, of course, on finance, but also on resiliency in light of all the destruction and the storms, and how to, both programmatically make sure that we're totally cutting edge on how we're responding, but also on design and construction, how we rebuild things stronger. That's a big part of these mountain projects, the different design techniques that are involved in that. Of course, DMV, we have a special committee on DMV, and as you know, we have a new DMV commissioner who's working very hard to improve NCDOT. And, you all may know better than me, that's a work in progress. But, to the governor's credit, he's rolling up his sleeves and said, we're going to take that on. And what he said to me about it, I can't say in public company. That had some colorful language, but suffice it to say, I think there's a commitment with our legislative partners and from the governor to improve DMV. So our board will be engaging in those and also economic development because we've got some people on our board, especially our former chair, Mike Fox, who've been deeply involved in economic development in their own divisions. And so we're going to try to do more in that area. And I'd be glad to talk about more of that with you all offline. But I would encourage you to come to the summit. And it's up on our website. And that's it. So as always, y'all feel free to call me anytime. I mean, I'm the Division 10 rep. And Stephen is here, of course, too. And Brad Lale from Division 12 is an alternate for this. So we're all available to you all. So, and I know almost all of you and have worked with almost all of you on one thing or another over these years. So call me anytime. Thanks, folks.
Thanks, Tony. Is there any?
Anybody want
really
a
quick
question or anything?
Just, yes, go ahead, Mayor.
Be glad to, if you have time.
Yes.
Yeah, very, very quickly. Thank you, Tony. I really appreciated this. Is there going to be any limitations on where PP3s can be delivered? Because I know they're great, but I don't want all of them in Mecklenburg County so that we have to pay on every single road that we use. So is there going to be any limitations that have to be spread throughout the state?
I'm not aware of like a statutory limitation that says you can't do more than X P3s in one place. No, I'm not aware of that. I think as a practical and political matter, you're going to see them spread out. And with, who knows what the future holds here. I mean, as the system gets more and more connected, 277 and such, but, so no, the short answer is no, there's no geographic restriction, but I know that, and you may know this too, that there's conversations in other parts of the state that are in the news about this. Like there's Capitol Boulevard in Raleigh. There's conversations about, there's a couple bridges down east. There's conversations about, so I think the number was 11 before it was pared down in this legislation where it was increased to 6.
I just think it looks kind of punitive if all of them are clustered in one part of the state and nobody else has to use PP3s, but Mecklenburg County and our region has to.
Well, what I stressed at the beginning when I was talking about that is they don't come here unless you all want it. I mean, so, if you don't want it, that's your call. I mean, we're not going to force P3s on anybody. So that's an important check on what you're talking about, John, but I hear you. Definitely. Any other questions?
So along those lines, and I don't want to get too far off track here, but as the planning board, I still think sometimes this board does a fantastic job, once in the weeds and getting through and creating plans with what we have, does a fantastic job. But I think overall, there still is a major concern. Charlotte is the major economic driver for the state. I think maybe responsible for about 25% of the revenues. And correct, I would like to know if I'm off here and by how much, but I think we only get roughly half of those tax dollars back in terms of roads as a percentage compared to the rest of the state. And so I hope that when we do P3s, because I think we saw it in the north, I hope we don't see it in the south, but it's treated like a replacement. And it's like, hey, you get the P3, now we don't have to spend money here. We're going to go spend it somewhere else. But what we see is that even with the P3 in the north, it doesn't address any of the congestion for the general purpose lanes or for the surrounding areas in the other roads. But there's a sense that it's taken care of because now we have managed lanes. So I guess that's a long way of saying, I hope that if you introduce new P3s that you consider language suggesting that it's not a replacement. It's only complementary, and those towns still, in those cities and those regions, still deserve equitable funding.
Right. And, I think that the P3s and the capital program are two separate things, and the capital program is what it is. And so all the projects, that the state portion of the P3s, sort of the down payment, so to speak, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but that goes through the capital program through the STIP, correct? Yeah, they're shaking their heads. Yeah. So So like the one that, both of these now in 77, the one that will be and the one that has been, that sort of the state's initial contribution goes through the capital program. But, beyond that, it's private money that does those. And the STIP, the capital program, still rocks on in its
Ultimately,
own way.
maybe this isn't the place, and Lisa often reminds me that it's not. But I'm confused as to when and where the right place is to say, as this planning board for the largest economic driver, we talk about putting in programs for economic development. This is your biggest opportunity right here in Charlotte, right? And we're the and we're the planning board for the largest economic engine that's already here, that's suffering. The entire region is suffering because of the traffic congestion. And we're drastically underfunded compared to the other regions in the state. So I don't know how, as a planning board, we express that. I understand it's, not directly related, but as a planning board, is it not worth some mention at some place that we are, and I know they know we're underfunded, but are we even represented, right? When we do the planning, when we're paying twice as much into it as what we're getting back out of it. And, does the way that it's allocated today really make sense when we have these drastic congestion issues?
Well, with all multi-layered questions, there's a multi-layered answer to that. So on several levels, you're well represented. I mean, you're represented on the Board of Transportation. You're represented in the North Carolina General Assembly. A lot of the capital program allocation formulas are set in parameters in the statute, and then with a working group that, like Neil was on before, that sets the criteria for those by statute within the parameters. So, that ultimately that flows back to the legislature. And, before that STIP program, there was not a scoring system per se for roads. And the bigger places might not have had it as well as they do now. For those of you that were around more than 15 years ago. But the other thing is, and I hear this as chair of the Board of Transportation, I will say that the Triangle is a tremendous area in size and economic impact, and they would argue about their economic impact. It may not be quite as much as the Charlotte region, but it's a lot. And I think everywhere I go in the state, unfortunately, I hear a version of what you said. Well, why don't we get, because we've got all this going on here, and but I live here and I know, so I absolutely get what you're saying and feel your pain. But it's I think right now, the system is kind of set, and that doesn't mean it can be changed. Kathy Harrington, who many of you might know, was a senator from down here, was one of the architects of that capital program system in the statutes, and is quite, I think, protective of it because of what was worse before we had that. And so, but I'd be glad to talk more about that offline. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. It's, nothing's gonna get solved in this, tonight's meeting, but as a board, I just wonder, is there ever an opportunity? And if so, maybe we get it on the agenda. I don't mean to take up this time of this meeting in your time. I just know you're familiar with the numbers of where the money comes from and where it goes. Is why I posed the question to you. But Lisa, so I'm just going to drop it. But if you see an opportunity for us to get it on the agenda, until we get it on the agenda, and if not, then we'll have private discussions. But I think it's a discussion for the board. I think if there are answers or direction we should go and something we can do to work with the state, I think it's not a bad thing for the state, because we're generating revenue for the state when Charlotte does well. And it helps everyone when Charlotte does well. And as we start to suffer from our roads being over congested and businesses moving away, the entire state suffers. So I don't know how and when we have that conversation or if we do, but I would love to see it either as an agenda item and if that's totally impossible, then have some direction as to where to go.
I think we can get staff to bring back some actual figures and have that
Yeah.
as an agenda item.
You know,
to
and
see
what-
where is the money from the STIP all across the state and divisions, kind of break that down to have some data, actual data as opposed to perception. Because we all, like you said, every area has the same perception that we don't have enough. And I think you summed it up when you started your presentation. There's not enough money. So,
Right. And perhaps, looking at my team over there, maybe sometime a hybrid, maybe a little workshop for
Yep.
people who are
we'll do an
interested,
education session.
which would be offline so that we wouldn't put it on everybody, but anybody that wanted to come, like before the meeting or something like that, we could have a presentation and, drill down some about, okay, where's the money coming from? Where's it going? How does the STIP framework overlay on that? And I think that could be useful.
It could potentially even tie into your North Carolina Go piece that you were talking about
Right,
earlier.
talk
I
about
think it's
ideas
not
for future.
unrelated, of course.
Sure. Great.
Okay, Thank
Mr.
you.
Rosenberg, did you have a comment?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I wanted to do a couple of things. First, our chairman spoke of economic development. I'm vice chair of our Economic Development Committee. It has really become forefront in the board's view of how we treat things. And I think that is a positive for places like Charlotte because we need the money. We have to accept reality of where our money comes from and how that body is constituted. And I think that while we have this great growth, other folks feel they have the same growth. When I was involved in getting the 485-85 interchange funded, I was told, well, Wilmington would like a new interchange by their airport. Well, it's hard to go back and forth with that because obviously we're much bigger, but those folks feel they have the right to certain things. As the legislative representative on the board, I can tell you they feel that by allowing this 1-cent sales tax, they are helping the urban areas. So they view that as a contribution. I think the reality is we have 3 mega growth areas. We have 3 major urban areas. And P3 is the only way that I see we're going to get things done. And whether it's unfair or not, the reality is we need to fix these roads. And that seems to be an agreed upon way to go forward.
Super. We're going to make sure and share all of your slides, Tony, with the entire board, so
Thanks.
that everybody's got that information. And our takeaway is to have an education session in regards to the information. So anything
And-
else you want to close with?
Yeah, just one thing to close with, and I've talked about this a long time, and some of you all have heard me give talks about it, but it's collaboration and relationships. Because, if you think about this region as an economic unit, like a big circle of an economy with a radius, it flows out. The radius of that, the circumference of that circle is way outside of Mecklenburg County. And, different economists would argue about how far it extends, but it's a good way. And what that means is that from a big picture standpoint, we're all in this together. And so we need to collaborate as a region in every way we can to get more resources to our region. People are commuting every which way, every day to get to their jobs or to get to their healthcare or to get to their entertainment, or their personal travel or whatever. And they're not necessarily actively thinking, oh, I just crossed from Cabarrus into Mecklenburg, or, from Stanley into Mecklenburg, or from Division 12 into Division 10, or, from Mint Hill into the county, or we've got a lot of different jurisdictional lines here, but we're one economic unit. So we need to collaborate. And the second part of my point is the relationships, because we all have our own important projects that are important to our towns and our cities, so we work together with the relationships we have to get those prioritized, by agreement in this group. So both on collaboration and with the relationships of our separate projects, we just got to work together, and there's strength in that. And I think with a lack of that, there's weakness. and that we lose if we cannot work together on these transportation issues that really raise the entire region here, so we're going to all sink or swim together basically on this. So that's my closing comment.
Thank you. We appreciate all you do. I know this is it's a highly paid position to be the chair. See,
She's giving me a hard time because I get mileage back and forth to Raleigh and
there you
I
go.
can get my hotel room reimbursed. That's it.
Take 2 cookies tonight. Super. Yeah, we appreciate you. We're gonna move on to the next agenda item, which is the consent agenda. Thanks, Neil. He's keeping me on track here. Can I get a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
First and a second, did you get all that? Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Motion carries. And now we'll move on to the 2055 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Additional update, Neil and his team. Take it away, Neil.
Thank you. So action requested in front of the board this morning or this evening is to adopt the 2055 Metropolitan Transportation Plan Fiscally Constrained Roadway and Transit Project List. I'll start with a brief overview of the project schedule. Merritt will cover the outcomes of the Phase 2 public engagement process. Allison Flewitt with Kimley Horn will overview the process to develop the fiscally constrained roadway project list. Kelly Goforth will provide an overview of the process for CATS to develop the fiscally constrained projects coming out of the transit service plan. And then I'll close us out with looking ahead, and we'll revisit the requested action. 2025 has been a big year for the development of this plan. We've completed the scenario planning and the revenue forecast for the roadway projects. We've identified congested corridors through the congestion management process. The project evaluation process, which Allison will talk about, began in January and concluded in May. We started our second phase of public engagement in June. That closed last month. Following the adoption of the fiscally constrained project list and a few other tasks that we'll cover later, we're going to start working on the report. And that'll be the focus of the third phase of public engagement, is on the draft report. That's really a culmination of all of these activities that have been occurring over the past almost 2 years now. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Merritt McCulley from CRTPO. He's going to give us an update on what we heard from Phase 2 of public engagement.
Good evening, everyone. So last time I spoke before y'all, we were about 90% done with our public engagement and the different pop-up events that we're doing. So I'm going to review that and then also go over all the things that we heard from the people that we were able to interact with in the communities across our planning area. And so the public comment period started on June 19th. So it's pretty crazy to think that the kids were just getting out of school when we started this and now they're going back. And so we want to talk about what we learned in that 30-day public comment period and the different ways that we solicited that feedback. So much of it was through digital engagement, through an interactive map and a co-located digital survey. So the map had the different projects linked on it with details, so people could literally press on a map and give a thumbs up or a thumbs down for different projects that are in their area or that they intended on using. They could also give more detailed comments in the digital survey. We had a robust schedule of pop-up events, as well as equity focus groups and other activities to engage with folks. And so this is the final schedule of our pop-up events. I think last time I spoke, we only needed to do 2 more, and we did those last 2 in Iredell County. And so we really wanted to cover a wide range of events, not only throughout our planning area, but also events that would have a regional pull. So events that have a large enough audience to not just pull people who are living in that area, but also from the surrounding areas. And so we made sure to hit up a lot of festivals and farmers markets, and also some events that were targeted specifically at the Latino population to get some of our limited English-speaking population engaged with as well. We also hosted some equity focus groups at various physical locations throughout the planning area, as well as 3 different virtual ones, including one in Spanish that was virtual. And all of these equity focus groups we conducted by invitation in order to include folks that traditionally haven't had their voices heard in the transportation planning process. And so those were facilitated by Civility Localized, except for the Spanish one, which I facilitated myself, and got to hear in more in depth from residents around the planning area. Because when you're at a festival or a farmer's market, people are trying to move on to the next stall. So that format gave people really the time and space to be able to give their thoughts in more detail, and in order to engage with us and our knowledge. And so some additional engagement opportunities, we had some stakeholder meetings with folks who had a very specific relationship with the transportation system, whether that be from an economic development perspective with employers who are concerned about employees commuting, moving people and goods, thinking about, our emergency services folks who are literally moving throughout our planning area to respond to different situations, and then our freight and people who move things for the economic system, as well as sustainability and mobility, thinking more about our service, nonprofits and organizations of that such. We did a couple of community presentations, one with the Western Union Municipal Alliance in Monroe, as well as a field trip at the Urban Design Center with Freedom School Partners. And shout out to Judy for really pushing for that event, and for Will for helping out with that, because it was a really big success. So it was exciting to see the kids so excited about learning how the transportation process learns, and also their amazement at how expensive it is. And so we also did a couple of radio interviews with a Spanish radio station. I think the last time I talked, we had done one. We did another one, and as well as inviting residents to come to our board meetings. And so all of this you can read in more detail in our Phase 2 engagement summary, which is included in a link in the digital version of your agenda packet. And that will be on our website. You can also find it more easily at www.2055mtp.org. And so some of the things that we found were that the majority of folks who responded to our survey believed that the fiscally constrained project list matched with the goals and objectives that we created in Phase 1. And another thing was that majority of the respondents represented minority communities. So roughly half, 48% of respondents were Black or African American, which was a 40% increase from Phase 1 of our MTP engagement. 13% of respondents were Hispanic, representing a 10% increase. And then 12.5% of our respondents come from carless households, so representing not just a diversity racially, but also for how people get from A to B. So here's broadly what we've heard. We had 939 data points, and so that means the amount of people who interacted with our map or our survey was roughly 939 times. So sometimes people will give additional comments or more thumbs up and thumbs down, so that's what that means. Our different projects were divided into roadway, intersection, and transit projects. Overall, the number of upvotes greatly outnumbered the number of downvotes. You can see listed the most upvoted projects for each of the each type of project for roadway, intersection, and transit. Thinking about John Belk Freeway for roadways, South Boulevard and Tyvola Road, as well as other intersection projects along I-77 were our most popular for intersection projects, and then the red line being the popular one for our transit projects. In total, you can see the different comments for each type of project below in the last row. Just to note that the counties listed are the counties in which the projects are located, not the origin of the respondents. And once again, you can learn more about what we learned from residents in the equity or in the engagement summary that is linked in your packet. Pending any questions, that concludes my part.
All right, you get the rolling cavalcade of presenters this evening. So I'm Allison Flewitt. I'm happy to be back with you all this evening, and I'll be walking us through the fiscally constrained roadway project list and our process to develop this And as you all know, you've had the opportunity to hear a bit about this along the way. We've gone through many different stages in the development of our roadway fiscally constrained project list. That began, as Neil said, all the way back in January of this year, when we had our jurisdictions begin the process of submitting and identifying projects to be considered as a part of this process. And that continued on with project evaluation and then concluded with the application of fiscal constraint and that determination. I'll go through a little bit more of this detail, but really just want to help kind of set the stage for the information that's been included in your agenda packet. But just as a reminder, that project submission window did open up in mid-January. We had that open for about a month. During this process, we want to once again thank you all, thank the members of the TCC and all the staff of the jurisdictions for working with us very closely during that month-long process to identify projects to be included. We did have a workshop that came as a part of one of our TCC meetings where we introduced everybody to the ArcGIS online map platform that was used for this project submission process, which was helpful because there were quite a number of things that we were asking for as we began this process. And I think it's helpful to kind of revisit this now as we're reaching this particular point where we're looking at adopting this list, because this did start with our jurisdictions and we were really looking for quite a number of pieces of information that helped us make informed decisions about the next steps as we were moving forward with our process, whether that be our cost estimation or our project prioritization or ultimately that determination of fiscal constraint. So just walking through some of the highlights of this process as we went all the way from January into what Merritt just described for us with the public engagement process in June and July. Once we had those projects identified, we worked very closely with a roadway ranking review committee. And again, special thanks to many of you all and the staff in your jurisdictions to help us through that roadway ranking review committee. We worked very closely with that committee, meeting several times throughout a few different months to go into a large amount of detail with these projects, whether that was an initial vetting of the projects, walking through our Tier 1 and Tier 2 prioritization process, reconciling those project submissions, making sure we had all the right details. When we did that Tier 1 evaluation, that's really more of our quantitative evaluation. You all may remember kind of the funnel graphic that we've used in the past, where we're looking at some higher level things like congestion, safety, and access to employment. We worked with our roadway ranking review committee during that process to make sure that we were understanding the application of that quantitative data and that everybody was kind of pointed in the same direction as we were going forward. And understanding where we stood after that initial Tier 1 scoring process. That was really important for us because we did need to have a cutoff point, moving from Tier 1 to Tier 2, where we essentially took a subset of our projects that scored the highest and progressed those into a Tier 2 evaluation. That's where we had a little bit more detail with some additional evaluation criteria, both quantitative and qualitative in nature. Again, the roadway ranking review committee played an incredibly important role here because this was an opportunity with our quantitative criteria to look over our methodology and kind of over our shoulders. And then on the qualitative to go project by project and actually score those projects to make sure that we had something that was being done consistently across all of the projects, across all of our geographic areas, whether that was for our corridors, our intersections, or our interchanges. So that was very important to have a very transparent and open process. And even throughout this time, we were going back and updating our standing committees, our steering committee and our advisory committee, and keeping them abreast of how this was progressing. Now, at that same time, we were also going through our roadway cost estimation process. And I know I've presented to you all about that and some of the steps that we undertook as a part of our cost estimation. But I think some of the things to note there is that we tried to kind of look beyond just the highest level, moving forward with some of those typical NCDOT unit costs. because we understand this is a very dynamic subject. We heard that in our prior presentation, that these costs are changing very rapidly. So we went back to some projects that have recently been implemented or are obligated in this region. We compared some of those cost numbers, and we wanted to make sure that we were validating that as we applied that to the unit cost values that we were generating kind of across the board for our area. And then once we had all of that done, we compared this back to the roadway capital revenues that we had adopted with your all help earlier on in the process to generate our draft fiscally constrained project list. And just a little bit of a summary there of what we came up with. We have 3 different categories, and you'll kind of see a very, very zoomed out map that corresponds there. Our first number at the top are what we call our existing plus committed projects. But another way to consider those are these are the projects that are coming from our TIP. So essentially our first 10 years of our MTP matches exactly to our TIP. That consistency is very important. We want to make sure that that is reflected exactly so that we can continue to have that consistency. That is a federal requirement. So we want to show that just as it is. So those projects that you see up in green, that's coming from our TIP, and that represents all the way out to 2035. So then you see the number 73. That's where we start our fiscal constraint determination. So essentially from 2036 out to 2055, we have an additional 73 projects across our area that have been able to be fiscally constrained with the available revenues. Now, just as a reminder, when we fiscally constrain, it's not just to one big number. We are constraining to our statewide, our 2 regions, and our 2 divisions as kind of individual funding pots. That's important to us because we know that we can't kind of cross those boundaries with the revenue dollars that are available to us. So that ended up with, again, 73 corridors, intersections, and interchanges. And then looking at our unfunded projects, we have an additional 123 roadway projects that are unfunded. So they're not able to be accommodated with the revenues that we have available through 2055. I mentioned going back to that prioritization process. We kind of had that tier 1, tier 2 cutoff. We're including all of those projects as a part of our unfunded. So it is important to note that even if a project is unfunded as a part of our plan, it is still carried forward in the plan. It is documented in the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Kelly, and she's going to talk about the transit component of our fiscally constrained project list.
Good evening. I'm Kelly Goforth with the Charlotte Area Transit System. I'm the Chief Development Officer. And tonight I'm just going to briefly review the process that we went through to update the transit system plan and develop the financially constrained transit project list. These slides are consistent with what I presented a couple of months ago to the board. So I'm just going to briefly hit the highlights. So from October 2024 to May of 2025, CATS went through this process shown here on this slide to update the transit system plan. And this included the development of a financial model, the development of alternative scenarios, and a robust public engagement process to update that transit system plan and develop an implementation schedule and financial plan as well. As Merritt described, our transit projects were included in the CRTPO public engagement process, but we also had a very robust community engagement process as part of that transit system plan update process. So on May 28th, 2025, the Metropolitan Transit Commission approved our fiscally constrained implementation plan for the transit system plan. That includes both the Better Bus program with improved bus frequency, service expansion, microtransit, and bus stop amenities. And it also includes the phased implementation of our rapid transit corridors. That includes the Red Line commuter rail project from Charlotte Gateway Station to Mount Morn, the Silver Line light rail from the airport to the Coliseum Evans Station, the Gold Line streetcar extension from Rosa Parks Place to Eastland, and the Blue Line extension from I-45 South Boulevard to Carolina Place in Pineville. And we noted that future extensions of the Silver Line and the Blue Line would be considered as funding allows and the implementation of enhanced bus service in the interim. So we are requesting that these rail projects be included in the fiscally constrained plan as part of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan adopted by the CRTPO. And that will allow our projects to be eligible for federal funding and to advance into the federal project development process, including completing the environmental documents. I just want to note that the revenue assumptions in the financial analysis did assume the future Mecklenburg County sales tax, which was authorized by the North Carolina General Assembly, and Mecklenburg County Board of County Commissioners recently voted to place that on the November ballot for referendum. And so these are the list of the financially constrained projects, including the estimated cost and the horizon band for the projects. With that, I'm going to turn it back to Neil.
Thanks, Kelly. I'm going to go ahead and close us out here. In addition to the public engagement that Merritt described as part of phase 2, it's a federal requirement for any MPO, once they have a draft fiscally constrained project list, to hold a resource agency meeting. We held a webinar. We figured we'd get the best attendance remotely, but we're required to engage federal, state, and local agencies in the review of this draft project list. So I won't read off the attendees here, but we got very good attendance in the webinar that was held on August 4th, again, to review the draft fiscally constrained project list. So the work doesn't end tonight. If the board adopts the fiscally constrained project list, we do have to initiate the air quality conformity process on the draft list. That includes both roadway and transit projects. It's not just CRTPO, but it's the other MPOs that are within our model area. So Gaston, Cleveland, Lincoln MPO, Cabarrus, Rowan MPO must be coordinated in this combined air quality conformity determination. And that process takes a few months. And so in order for us to remain on schedule with that March 2026 adoption stipulated by FHWA, we do need action by the board as soon as possible. Before we get to that, I just wanted to brief you all on a few other ongoing activities as we move towards finalizing the work with the MTP and documenting it in a report. We're updating the active transportation corridor tool. This is being updated with our bike ped work group. This is something that we brought in the 2050 MTP as a means for our jurisdictions to optionally evaluate projects that would be good candidates for funding for bike and ped. I want to emphasize this is an optional tool, and we are enhancing it to make it more useful for our member jurisdictions. Again, many of your TCC members serve on this bike ped work group. They're providing us with valuable input on how we can make this tool even more useful locally for you all. The revenues, we spoke about that earlier. The roadway revenues are complete and adopted by the board earlier this year. We are finalizing the transit revenue projections, discretionary grant program revenue projections, and maintenance revenue projections. Those are all required, again, by FHWA to be part of this financial plan. So we will provide an information report in September, and we will be requesting action of the board, again, to close out the remaining MTP revenues and get your approval on those. The congestion management process, we have identified congested corridors based upon a methodology. We did present the congested corridors to your TCC members at a staff meeting earlier this month, and we did task TCC members with congested corridors in their jurisdictions to identify mitigation strategies. You're not bound by those strategies. These are just policy considerations as these projects move through the process. We will be providing an update on the congestion management process at the meeting in September. So That concludes the presentation. Here with the action, once again, is to adopt the 2055 MTP fiscally constrained roadway and transit project list. Happy to take any questions that you have.
Questions for Neil and his team? I know that was a long presentation, but it's been a long time coming. You guys have been working on this for a number of months. Mr. Osborne.
Is there any prioritization given to the projects for getting to the rail line, since it's assumed that we'll have funding so we can optimize that transit that it would be providing? Any priority to those projects?
We have that two-tiered methodology that we've reviewed with the board before, but there's no transit station proximity within that necessarily. It's really incumbent upon your staff members in your jurisdictions to submit your priorities. And if your priorities are getting residents or regional traffic to those proposed stations, then that's really kind of a local decision.
Question, others? Okay, hearing none, is there we've got a motion to adopt the 2055 MTP physically constrained roadway and transit project list. Is there a second? A first and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Well done, Neil. I know you guys have, again, continue work on that. All right, moving on to our next presentation, the draft 2026-2035 Transportation Improvement Program. Travis.
Hi, everyone. Travis Johnson here with CRTPO. I'm here to give an update on the transportation for the 2635 Transportation Improvement Program and a requested action. So I'm gonna go over the requested action, talk a background about the item, go over a brief schedule, and then bring up the request again. So the request tonight is to approve the opening of a public comment period from August 21st until September 19th on the draft 2026-2035 TIP, the 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan amendments, and in the air quality conformity report. So a little background on these items. These were included in your agenda packet, but they're also available on our website, and you can also scan the QR code to go to the website to read all the documents. The public comment period on the draft 2026-2035 is a necessary step for TIP adoption to occur in October. So the proposed public comment period would be on the TIP and the other documents. And so after the public comment, we would return back to you, provide a summary of that feedback, and then ask for adoption. The MTP amendments and modifications are for the currently adopted MTP, which is why we're modifying the 2050 MTP. As a reminder, the MTP or the TIP is a subset of the MTP. So the projects in the TIP must also be in the MTP. So if a project was delayed and it went beyond a horizon year, we then need to adjust in the MTP what that horizon year was. If a project was broken into parts, we then need to amend the MTP to show the project as separate parts. And so changes like that would then merit an MTP amendment. Air quality conformity determination is a review of the projects incorporated in the TIP. And this is looking to make sure that we are meeting the requirements of the state implementation plan and also ensuring that we will not cause new violations of the National Amber Air Quality Standards or worsen existing violations. Additionally, we did coordination with of the TIP and the documents inside of it with NCDOT, did multiple presentations to this group and the TCC, and also interagency consultation with the project list. So looking at the TIP schedule, it was originally released back in January. NCDOT had their own public comment periods for each of the divisions. There was also the Metrolina and STIP conformity kickoff meeting back in March. We presented updates in March and May to the TCC and the board. And then as mentioned earlier, the STIP was adopted in July. Looking forward, if the public comment period is opened, we would then engage in the public comment period. We'd bring back the information to you in October for adoption, and then the FHWA would adopt all three documents at the conclusion. So with that, the action is requested is the opening of the public comment period on the draft TIP, the 2050 MTP amendments, and the air quality conformity determination.
Questions for Travis at this point? And it looks like he's asking for action to approve the opening of the public comment period from August 21st till September 19th and on the adoption of the draft 2026-2035 TIP, the 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan amendments, and the air quality conformity determination report. Since I
Move
didn't
to
hear any
approve.
question, we've got a motion. Is there a second? A second, Mr. Osborne? Any discussion? And hearing none, all of those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries. Great job, Travis. You're up next. The 2028-2037 TIP development process. This is our NCDOT prioritization 8.0. Seems funny to talk about 8.0 and we're still trying to get projects going on 3.0. So bring us some hope.
So this is it's a cycle. So as one process comes to an end, we start the next process. So a few months ago, we initiated the process for prioritization 8.0, which is going to develop the next TIP and STIP. So I'm gonna go over the request, overview of how the project inventory was collected, a brief overview of the public comment we received, the current estimated funding for prioritization 8.0 with a lot of caveats. And then we'll go over the schedule and milestones moving forward, and then we'll again go back to the request. So we're asking the board to approve the recommended aviation, bicycle, and pedestrian highway and transit rail list project for submission into NCDOT for scoring and prioritization 8.0, which will develop the 2028-2037 TIP. So in a brief overview, again, prioritization is the data-driven process in which we select projects for funding through the STIP. The results guide programming in the TIP and the STIP, and we prioritize projects based upon aviation, bicycle and pedestrian, highway, rail, and public transit. We're currently in the first phase of the three-phase process. First is to identify projects. Next, and then go through project scoring. That's also the phase when we add local input points to projects to represent local desire. And then the finals or for local allocation. And then we end up with the draft STIP and TIP that we then review, amend MTP as necessary, and do an air quality conformity determination document, which is again what we acted on for the previous item, which was the P7 prioritization process. Projects that we are submitting fit into one of three categories. They are carryover, which means they've already been evaluated, they meet specific criteria, they're part of an already funded project, or there's an environmental document ongoing for that project. And so those get resubmitted automatically. Holding tank projects are projects that were previously submitted but not eligible for automatic resubmittal. These count towards our submittal slots of our limited number of submittal slots for consideration. And then after we've reviewed the holding tank projects, we have the ability to complete our submittal slots by applying new projects. For non-highway modes, we work with our member jurisdictions and organizations to submit projects in adopted plans to complete those lists. Typically, we do not maximize those lists because it is a smaller funding pot than the highway projects. And then the highway projects we select based upon the horizon year and score in the MTP. So for this project list, we were using the draft but now adopted 2055 Metropolitan Transportation Plan's fiscally constrained project list. So again, the board may adjust the list based upon public feedback. The P8 project list should also align with the MTP fiscally constrained project list because the TIP is a subset of MTP projects. And the updates we've been sharing as quickly as we receive them on the CRTPO P8 webpage. One correction we received very recently this week was from NCDOT was about the I-77 project to construct additional lanes from West Catawba Avenue to NC 150. While we were updating a cost estimate for this project, NCDOT was doing an evaluation of all the projects that were listed under carryover. In that evaluation, they realized that they had incorrectly identified this project as a carryover project, which means it would not be automatically resubmitted. Because this project is not included in our 2055 MTP fiscally constrained project list, then we would not be adding it to our P 8.0 project submittal list. Because the fiscally constrained project list is a short list of projects we would like funded over the next horizon years that are in the plan. And so those projects, primary funding mechanism is the TIP. So those projects are typically then aligned with what is in the MTP. Additionally, in working with our member jurisdictions, one rail project that was submitted to us for consideration will not have an approved plan. It is included in prior to submission. However, it is in a document that is working through the approval process. And it's a safety crossing at Summit Avenue, Norfolk Southern Main Line crossing. There was a presentation earlier today to transportation staff, and there was no issues identified within this project. And it is anticipated that this project would have been adopted very soon. And so as long as the plan is adopted, we had no issues with still including it in the project list because we have extra rail project submittal slots that are going unused. So this will not hurt any project that is already on an approved list through this process, and it should be adopted prior to allocation of local input points and ranking through the prioritization process. So the public comment summary, we had a news story by WNC TV. We did social media posts. We had to start a web page. We had a banner, interactive map, project list. We did a newsletter, an event calendar. We sent out email and press releases. Overall, we received 36 general comments about the project list. People brought up safety concerns. There are questions and comments about projects not on our project list, but the majority of highway, but also we reviewed the 2055 MTP physically constrained project list because a lot of those projects, again, overlap with the P8 project list because those project lists are intended to overlap. However, we don't have any recommended changes to the project list. Most of the comments were general and concerns, and we shared the information with who needed to see them. However, we're still recommending the list to move forward as presented. In addition to this, I know we've been receiving questions about how much funding we will have for prioritization 8.0. So also very recently, we have received updated estimating funding totals. So as of July 9th, 2025, for the statewide mobility tier, it's anticipated that we will have $1.6 billion available for funding. For Region E, which is Mecklenburg and Union, it's $277 million for regional impact projects. For Iredell, which is Region F, it's anticipated for $366 million. Division 10, which is Mecklenburg and Union, is $53 million. And Division 12, which is Iredell County, it's anticipated to be $63 million. Now, again, that's not just for that county. All of those counties listed are the counties that will be submitting projects for prioritization for this money that is anticipated to be available for P8. I say that also that this is an estimated funding amount because they will change, and it is in all likelihood, this number will go down. There will be variance adjustments. There will be cost changes because of future activities, schedule changes. And so these numbers were shared with us as a best case scenario, but we should all anticipate those numbers we just saw, or these numbers here, to go down as we move through the prioritization process. So we will have lower numbers once we're able to prioritize. So schedule moving forward for P8. Previously, we had the TC recommend open a public comment period and the board approved. We had our public comment period. We're here now to ask for endorsement of the project list. If it is endorsed, then we would submit all of our projects to the NCDOT spot office by September 30th. After the projects are submitted, it goes for a review of the projects to make sure everything we submitted was accurate. Then from June to December of 2026 is when we apply local input points. Then winter to spring of 2027 is when we'll calculate final scores. And then the summer of 2027, we will have the draft 2828, 2037 STIP will be released, and we will start that process similar to our previous agenda item, to where we then make amendments to the MTP and do air quality conformity determination. And at that point also, we'll be starting P9 process. So with that, the action requested is to approve the recommended aviation, bicycle, and pedestrian highway transit rail project list for submission to NCDOT for prioritization 8.0, which will develop the 2028-2037 TIP.
Mr. Jones?
Yes. Can you go back to your slide? Can you go back to your slide where it shows the funding? Is that per year or is that for the whole TIP 2028 to 2037?
So these are the funds that will be available, like additional funds that will be available for the STIP. Okay. And these are numbers that were shared with us. We did not generate these numbers. So how the previous cycle for prioritization 7.0, remember we had those negative numbers So we weren't able to prioritize new projects into the regional impact and division needs tier, but we did receive statewide funding. So this is again, the funds that will be added. So we are under the the 2026-2035 tip is the one we are currently going to move towards, which is the project list, which we are opening a public comment period on. So when we add new projects for the 2028-2037 STIP, the availability to add projects to the STIP is estimated to be in these dollar amounts. So the whole STIP, which covers a 10-year time period, this is not all the funding for that 10-year time period, but this is the amount of funding that is anticipated to be available to add new projects through the prioritization process.
And right now we're in year 3 and 4, 5, 6, and 7, and we had 36 public comments. So we've really got a lot of weight and energy into this, I can see. Really great.
Other questions, comments? Mayor Higdon, and then Brian.
Yeah, just to comment back on the funding, is that usual that Mecklenburg and Union County, our area would get less funding than less populous?
So that is the amount of funding that's available for all of those counties. So that's not, those are our 2 counties in our planning region. But when we submit a project for the division needs tier in Division 10, we are also competing with projects that are submitted from Canberra, Stanley, and Anson. So all of us are submitting for those numbers. And as you can see, those numbers are low. And so we are still working our way out from the budgeting issues we saw in P7 and P6. So hopefully in the next prioritization cycle, there will be more funds available. Again, these are the best case scenarios, so we should anticipate these numbers to go down. Just in the interest of transparency, we're just sharing with you what we know. Because we received questions on would we even have positive values. It appears as if currently the values are estimated to be positive, which means we will be receiving projects as opposed to the previous prioritization cycle for the division needs and regional impact. So that's good news. Just seeing how far that goes. I mean, we'll have to work through the prioritization process and see what is submitted. Because again, we submit projects as part of a competitive process to NCDOT's spot office, and then they're ranked and compared, and then that's what is allocated.
Neil wanted to add something real quick on that.
Everything Travis said is correct, but I also wanted to just address Mayor Higdon's comment about the 2 different divisions there. So the first thing that comes off the top is the funding for committed projects that don't have to go through P 8.0. So what I take from this, and I'm pretty sure this is accurate, but Division 10 has a lot of projects that are committed in right-of-way acquisition, about to start construction, in construction. That all comes off the top first. But the way the STI legislation works is all 14 divisions start with the same amount of funding, but it really depends as to how many projects, again, that you have are committed, and that's taken first. And so that's why you see a diminished amount in 10 as opposed to 12.
Thank you.
Mr. Holmes had a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Travis, my question is about the Summit Avenue project.
Yes.
So if I understand correctly, and maybe I'm just asking for clarification here, but was that included in the public comment period that was held between July 17th and July 31st?
Yes.
Okay. And was there any specific comments regarding that project that you can share with the board?
Nope.
Thanks, sir.
At least not that I recall. Usually our rail projects don't receive a lot of comments specifically. And I know there's been a lot of work done on this project through CDOT and working with other projects in the region. And it was included in the public comment period. Typically, before we receive the projects, we screen, is it an approved plan? And there was just some confusion over their timeline and what we were going to require prior to the September 30th deadline. So that is working to be rectified right now.
Travis, if you would just allow me to ask a question. So I guess I need a little bit of a clarification that's, based on this project, that's the additional lane on 77 from West Catawba to 150, that you were just notified on August 12th that there was an error. It seems like now this is flawed as well as what we just approved for the 2055 plan. because this project was, if I'm reading correctly, a cascading project that was in the constrained list. And now that it's totally being removed, I feel like, help me understand. It sounds
Right.
like both.
So in the
both-
2055 MTP, that was a project that was submitted, but under the category, it was listed as an unfunded project, which means it is not listed in our fiscally constrained project list on the draft list that was just approved. So the fiscally constrained project list is the projects that we are saying that we are going to be submitting through the prioritization process, because those are the projects we would like to see within that 20-year time horizon. So currently in our estimated funding for the projects that we are saying that we are going to submit in the MTP's fiscally constrained project list, that project is not included in that list. For carryover projects specifically, we were going to allow, or all projects were going to be resubmitted because they were subparts of other projects and were intended to just keep moving forward because it did not take one of our limited submittal slots. And so because of the limited number of submittal slots that we have, we typically preserve the highway project submittals for the projects that are in the draft fiscally constrained project list of the MTP. So that way we have the best chance of having those projects reach the development stage.
So this obviously changed after the public comment period.
It did.
Is, you know, I guess I feel like this is very flawed to have that large of a project in our area that was not included in the public comment period.
No, it was concluded in the carryover list, but yes, it was not included. That would not be included in the holding tank project list.
So
That is
it's,
correct.
you know, presented as to the 36 people or whoever made comments that it was in the carryover list.
Right.
And now, you know, 7, 8 days ago, oh, whoops, we made a mistake. And we use that in general, not you.
Correct.
That should not have been the carryover list. So now it's not going to be on this project, even a part of the whole P 8.0, even as unfunded. So like I said, I feel like it's flawed just simply because it's a last minute change that was not part of the public comment. So
We can share that
Which is
feedback with
unfortunate.
NCDOT.
other questions, comments? If not, there's action. We have a motion on the floor to approve the recommended aviation bicycle ped highway transit rail project list for submission to NCDOT for the scoring prioritization 8.0, which will develop 2028, 2037. Sounds like Mayor Becker has a second. He's over there waving his arms and everything. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye. Anybody opposed? Motion carries. All right, moving on to our next, and almost to the end of the agenda. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out. We've got our discretionary grants program, Jennifer Stafford. So the good news is Jennifer's going to talk about how we're going to get money for at least to do some projects. You have a lot of money, Jennifer? Tell us you have a
I
lot.
wish I had gone before these other conversations, honestly.
You will help us end well, so
Okay, good.
good job. Take it.
So Jennifer Stafford with CRTPO. I'm the staff lead of the discretionary grants program. So today I wanted to give you an update on the existing grant funded projects, as well as talk about the fall call funding. So right off the bat, this year we started 2 different processes. So we did away with the spring call, which was for shortfalls only. And so all the submittals now come to this once a year opening. And so from after tonight, I'll start calling this the annual call. We're so used to calling it the fall call that I didn't want to switch it quite yet. So we have that. The other major change we had is we had a project oversight committee that was a subcommittee to the TCC. And as applications came in from the fall call, the project oversight committee would review them, help score them, and recommend to the TCC, who would recommend to you all. And that's why you saw Andrew so many times, because he was the chair to the POC. So this year the POC sunset, they did what they needed to do with helping to create the policy, doing recommendations. They're all people, or most all people that were on the TCC. So now we'll have workshops after the TCC meetings, and any TCC member can do exactly what we did with the POC. So it's a little bit more transparent, not that there wasn't anything not transparent before, but I think it will be easier for your staff to talk to the board members and say, this is why this project was selected. Again, we're doing data-driven things, so it's pretty clear, but I think this will just help. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes. A little bit more work for me, but I think it's the right way to go. So again, these are the active grant funded, so federally funded projects that you all have awarded in the past. We have 57 highway and intersection projects, 46 bike and ped projects, 3 transit, public transportation, 5 air quality, 4 planning studies, all still active. And these projects are in these phases. So the 4 planning projects, the design category that I have. So remember last year we had a real good feel good story, 20 applicants, and you all recommended funding all 20 projects. I would love for that to happen again this year, but we'll see. So the design category holds some that projects that have been awarded, but maybe haven't hired engineering firm, for example, or they're not scheduled to start. The funding might be a few years out yet. So I put them in the design category. Staff's thinking about them, doing some concept work, getting the municipal agreement, stuff like that. The engineering phase is exactly that. It's when the design starts to go on paper or in the computer, and they're working with a consultant usually. And then 36 projects in the right-of-way phase, so real estate acquisition, and 21 of those projects are in construction. So things are moving along. It slowly goes through. I mean, this isn't a fast process with federal funds, but it trickles through. So the good news is for this annual call, we have $51.5 million of federal funding. And you can see most of those funds, again, are in 29 to 31. So a project that you would award this year, for example, will end up in that design category for a little while until it gets going. Most of the funds you'll see are STBGDA or Surface Transportation Block Grant. They come to us. And some of this money, one reason why the funds, there's more of a pot this year is because of August redistribution, and NCDOT does a very good job at claiming some of the funds that haven't been spent by other organizations throughout the country. And so the pot's really nice this year. Right now, we are assuming the carbon reduction program will not be renewed. It expired this year. The congestion mitigation and air quality, we hope will be renewed, but we don't feel confident enough to do any programming of that funds right now. We typically get about $8 million a year, and as you know, we program 4 to 5 years out. So if it's renewed, we'll have a pretty big pot of CMAQ funds next year, which go to things like greenways, sidewalk, intersection, EV charging, stuff like that. So we can have good discussions about that if it's renewed. So I also wanted just to give you a background. So last year, a year ago, when we had the fall call, the highway projects local matches were all 50% or higher except for one. So they averaged about 46, but the majority, 5 out of 6 of the applications were 50% or more. So it's getting very competitive, makes the funding go to more projects, hence the 20 out of 20. And then the bike ped local match has been averaging 33 to 35% over the last couple of years. So I just wanted to get that to you because it can be a substantial dollar amount, especially for the smaller towns. So keep that in your mind as your staff comes to you. So just to wrap up the schedule, by the way, this presentation was given to the TCC when the call opened on Monday, as well as I send an email blast to anybody who's presented or had a project before, attends other CRTPO meetings and all the TCC. And as we go through the fall call or the annual call, I will do updates with the TCC. They won't forget that the call's open, but I'm still going to come up here and let them know. So it opened on Monday, 2 days ago. We have pre-submittal meetings that are mandatory. They must be done in order to apply, and those are due on October 17th. Your staff is very up to speed on those. Many of the staff have applied before, but they haven't. I've reached out to them and said, go through me, I can help you. And then applications will be due on the 31st. And then there's the TCC workshops that you see in November and early December. And then so the TCC will make their recommendation to the board, will come for information, probably January. Sometimes it gets pushed out a month, January, February, like this year you guys approved, the board approved the projects in March. And but we shoot for February, March, something like that, and then it goes to the Board of Transportation. Takes them a couple months to go through their information and action item. So with that, I will take any questions.
Great job. Questions for Jennifer? She has money. You should ask questions.
Your staff is asking, trust me.
Great job. We'll look forward to a lot of projects being submitted and
Yeah.
spend some of that money. All right. We've already heard from Tony on the Board of Transportation updates. Neil, updates for upcoming agenda items.
Reminder that the September meeting has been moved from the third Wednesday to the fourth Wednesday. So the September 24th CRTPO board agenda is anticipated to include action to endorse revisions to the functional classification system. And then we'll have information reports. We'll have a 2055 MTP update. We'll have an update on a CTP amendment identified by the city of Monroe for a US 74 and Rocky River Road grade separation. They came to the board earlier this year with a request to open a public comment period. So they're going to provide a summary of that public comment period. They'll be back here in October for action to approve that CTP amendment. As we do every September, we'll have an update from the transit providers on the Federal Transit Administration 5307 formula funding and how they are using this funding. That is a requirement in the FTA 5307 Memorandum of Understanding. That's not the board's MOU. It's a separate MOU just pertaining to these funds. And then we will also have an FY25 public involvement summary from Merritt and Judy. And that's all I have so far for the September 24th board agenda.
Super. Do we have any updates from Division 10 or 12? Oh, Felix? Come on up, Felix. We'd love to hear from you. If you've not met Felix yet, he is the new shoes of what was the former Brett. So the Division 10 engineer. So welcome, Felix. Good to see you.
Likewise, thank you for having me here. Again, Felix over on Division 10. I just want to give a quick update on 77 South Express lanes. As you're aware, the department is continuing to advance work on the I-77 South Express lanes project. Last week, we shared with you all on email that we released the request for qualifications on August 15th. As you may have seen, the RFQ and procurement webpage highlight the priority terms developed by the CRTPO working group. These priority terms will continue to guide us throughout the procurement process. NCDOT is also hosting an industry forum for developers and contractors interested in the project. The forum will be held on Tuesday, September the 2nd from 1 to 3 at the Raleigh Convention Center. The day before is the NC Transportation Summit that Tony mentioned. Scheduling the forum alongside the summit ensures strong attendance, as many interested parties will already be in Raleigh. We know that promoting competition is a priority for this board. As such, as of this afternoon, 115 people have had pre-registered for the industry forum, representing 74 different contractors, and we expect that number to grow. We also know that small business and DBE outreach on this project is a priority for CRTPO, as well as for NCDOT. We have shared in the invitation to the forum to more than 245 DBE contractors that are here registered in Division 10. Additionally, Division 10 is hosting a small contractor meeting on Saturday, September the 27th here in Charlotte. where the I-77 South Express Lanes project will be presented. In parallel with the procurement, we are progressing through the environmental process and conducting stakeholder outreach along the project corridor. So far this year, we've reached over 800 people throughout small group presentations. These sessions help educate the public about the project in advance of formal public meetings we plan to hold this fall. And we will continue to keep CRTPO informed and engaged as the project moves forward.
Great. Thanks, Felix. We appreciate you. Mark, anything exciting? Okay, great. It's going to yield this time. Yes, absolutely. Mayor Higdon. I'm sorry. Yeah, Mayor Higdon has a question, Felix.
I know you said that there's 115 contractors that have signed up, I think you said, or 115 people to attend your forum or whatever.
Mhm.
How many like major, I don't know what you call them, concessionaires such as Sintra have expressed an interest in this so far? Is that number known yet?
No, we still have, so we know that the major ones have signed up. We still have 2 more weeks before it closes, so we're expecting a lot more folks to show up.
Is it more than one?
Yes.
Great question. All right, super. Board member comments?
Just wanted to share with CRTPO that this afternoon, there was a kickoff event for the Yes for MEC campaign, promoting public acceptance of the 1 cent sales tax in Mecklenburg County that will be on the ballot in November. This sales tax is intended to fund up to $25 billion worth of projects in the county over a 30-year horizon. And so if you have any influence over anybody who can vote in that, appreciate your support. Thank you, Madam Chair.
We want to make sure that that website is fund MEC, not meth, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Make sure you get the consonants correct.
Might get more than 36 comments.
Yeah. Definitely, definitely. Any other comments, questions for the good of the group? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Got a first, got a second? Second, okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Meeting adjourned. We'll see you all on September 20th.